English step by step. Phrasal verbs with up, step 1. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please click like and subscribe, and if you'd like to request a lesson, you can do so below. Here are some common phrasal verbs which contain up, and I've put some example sentences here because often phrasal verbs are difficult to understand if you don't have a context. The context helps you to find the meaning. The first phrasal verb is a beginner phrasal verb. It's one of the first phrasal verbs you learn when you start studying English. Get up. I got up at 7 o'clock. Now, if you put this into other English words, you would have to say something like leave the bed. In other words, I left the bed, or I left my bed at 7 o'clock. Now, the word up suggests a movement up from a lying position. So, in that case, the word up is natural. And the next one is similar, wake up. She woke up early. In other words, it's the idea of lying in bed and then getting out of the bed. But in this case, it has more the sense of getting out of sleep or coming out of sleep. If we wanted to put this into other English words, we would say something like come out of sleep. Now the next one, turn up, is an example of a phrasal verb which has a meaning which is difficult to guess from the words in the phrasal verb, turn up. So in this case, we really have to look at the context. An old friend turned up at my party. So we can understand that if it's a party, then an old friend arrived at the party. Now, the phrasal verb has more than this meaning. It means to arrive when you don't expect it. So we could use other words like this, to arrive unexpectedly. The next one is quite a common one, and I think this one is easier to guess from the context. Go up. The price of petrol has gone up again. In this case, the context gives you the word price, and the price can increase or it can decrease. Now the word up helps you here because an upward direction suggests an increase. So we can understand this quite easily, that go up means to rise or increase. And we can make other sentences with this idea of something going up. For example, a plane goes up into the sky. So the next one is a phrasal verb with 3 words, catch up with. Again, it's another phrasal verb with a meaning which is difficult to guess from the individual words. So again, we have to look at the context. The slow runners caught up with the fast runners. Now in this case, we can imagine there's fast runners in one position and the slow runners in a behind position, and they have to run to be able to stay with the fast position. So in this case, catch up with can be put into other words like this, to reach the position. So we can explain it in other ways, but for the moment, let's just keep this idea of to reach a position which is ahead of you, to catch up with the faster runners. The slower runners have to run fast to be able to arrive and reach the position of the fast runners. And this can be said about cars, for example. Some cars have to go faster to catch up with the faster cars. The next one, stay up. Again, this may be tricky to guess from the individual words, stay and up. But if we look at the context, the parents allowed the children to stay up late. Now to stay is to be in a place. Up, again, it's similar to number 1 and number 2. It means that they didn't go to bed. The children could stay up late. And in this case, we could put it into other words like this, not go to bed. So the parents allowed the children not to go to bed. They could stay up late. The next one, grow up. Now, we might think from the word grow that this phrasal verb can be used for plants and trees and anything organic, like plants and trees, but in this case we're talking about people. This phrasal verb is only used for people. You can say that a tree grows, but you say that people grow up. And that means that they become taller, they become adults. A boy grows up into a man, a girl grows up into a woman. So I grew up in the countryside. So in this case we could say, in other words, I spent my childhood in the countryside. Or you could say, I matured in the countryside. For many of these phrasal verbs, you can find different ways to explain it. In this case, matured or spent childhood. Next one, call up. Now this is a common one. To call means to say the name of someone, to get the attention of someone, but we have to understand that here we're talking about using a telephone or a mobile phone. They immediately called up the police. That means they contacted by phone. Now you can see here that I've also put called the police up, because this is an example of a phrasal verb which you can use by putting the police in the middle. You can say called up the police, or you can say called the police up. We'll look at more examples in a moment. The next two examples are similar. Next one, blow up. Now this is an example of a phrasal verb which has more than one meaning. Now we'll look at one of the meanings in this exercise, and we'll look at another meaning of this phrasal verb in another video. Blow up in this context means to inflate or to fill with air. And I think we can imagine the meaning of this phrasal verb by looking at the context again. Balloons. If you want to make a balloon bigger or to increase in size, then you have to fill it with air. So often, again, you can see the word up has this idea of something increasing, something getting bigger. So the next one is look up. The student looked up the word in a dictionary. Now, you can understand look in the sense of seeing a word. You can see a word. But here, when we add the word up, it means to search for. So you search for a word, and you search for the meaning of a word in a dictionary. So you look the word up. And again, you could put the object, the word, in the middle. So you can say looked up the word or looked the word up. Here is an overview of the important points to remember when studying phrasal verbs or when trying to understand phrasal verbs. First point, what is a phrasal verb? It's a verb with 2 or 3 parts. Sometimes these parts are called particles, some of them are adverbs, and some of them are prepositions. Now, like other verbs, some phrasal verbs have an object. These are called transitive phrasal verbs. Let's look at some examples. The children made up a story. Now, the object is a story. They made up a story. Next example. The passengers got on the train. The object here is the train. The passengers got on the train. Now, some phrasal verbs, like other verbs, have no object. These are called intransitive phrasal verbs. For example, the children woke up. You can see after woke up, we don't have an object because it's only a subject. The children woke up. Again, the car broke down. There is no object. It's not like made up a story, got on a train. There is no object. The car broke down. Now, the next important point to remember about phrasal verbs is that some transitive phrasal verbs are separable. Now remember, transitive means that they have an object. So the question is, where do you put the object? Well, some phrasal verbs have two possibilities because the phrasal verb is separable. Let's look at this example here. The student looked up the word in a dictionary. The word is the object. We can also say the student looked the word up in a dictionary. So we have a choice. We can say looked up the word, and here looked the word up. In the second example, we separate the two parts of the phrasal verb. In other words, these are separable. Let's look at two more examples. She threw away the rubbish, and also she threw the rubbish away. Another example. They set up a business, or they set a business up. Now, the verb is separable if it is followed by an adverb. Now, in this case, the adverb could be up, or away, or out, or off. Let's look at these examples here. Up, an example is look the word up. Away is an adverb. We can say throw the food away. Out is an adverb. Put the fire out. Off is another adverb. We can say tell the children off. We can think of more examples with the same phrasal verbs. Look the word up. You could also say look the information up. And we can use a pronoun. For example, look it up. Next example, throw the food away, or throw the old computer away. We could also use a pronoun, throw it away. Next example, out. Put the fire out, or put the cigarette out, or put the candle out, or put it out. Next one, tell the children off, could also be tell the boy off, or tell the girl off. So those are examples of phrasal verbs which are separable, and now we can look at examples which are inseparable. In other words, you can't divide them. You can't put something in the middle. So let's look at some example. The babysitter looked after the children. Now in this case, we can't say the babysitter looked the children after. Now the reason for this is that the word after in this example is actually a preposition. When the second word in a transitive phrasal verb is a preposition, then we can't separate it. Now, how can you learn this? Well, the best way is just to read and listen to as many examples as possible so that you know that some phrasal verbs can be separated and some can't be separated. Of course, in the beginning, you may make mistakes, but slowly, you get a sense of which phrasal verbs are separable and which phrasal verbs are inseparable. Let's look at another example. The police looked into the crime. Now, in this way, we can't say the police looked the crime into, because the word into is a preposition. Next one. We came across some old photos. Again, we can't say we came some old photos across. Let's look at the general point here. The verb is inseparable if it is followed by a preposition. For example, after, look after the children. For, care for his parents. For example, the doctor cared for his parents. Into, we looked into the problem. On, get on a bus. You could also say get off a bus, get on a bus, get into a bus. So all of these examples have prepositions which you can't separate by putting the object before them. Now, there's an important point to remember about these separable phrasal verbs when we use pronouns. Pronouns, for example, it, him, her, us, me, them. These are all object pronouns. Now, if you use a pronoun in one of these phrasal verbs, it must go in the middle. Let's look at an example. The student looked it up. In other words, looked up the word, looked it up. We can't say looked up it because the pronoun goes in the middle. Another example, I put them on. Maybe we're talking about a pair of shoes. I put them on. The next one, her father woke her up. We can't say woke up her. No, it has to be woke her up. So pay attention to the way pronouns are used in these phrasal verbs. Now, many phrasal verbs have three parts. And when they do have three parts, the first part is usually an adverb and the second part is a preposition. Now, these phrasal verbs with three parts, again, can't be separated because they contain a preposition. Here's an example. I'm looking forward to the holidays. We can't separate these words. We can't say, I'm looking forward to the holidays too. It must be, I'm looking forward to the holidays. Next example, we can't put up with the noise. Now, put up with is quite a common phrasal verb which means tolerate or stand. And we can't say, we can't put the noise up with. We have to say, we can't put up with the noise. So there we have an overview of the main things to remember when you're using phrasal verbs. Let's look again at our examples of phrasal verbs with up, starting with the first one, get up. Now we can see there is no object. I got up at 7 o'clock. So this is an example of an intransitive phrasal verb. I got up at 7 o'clock. And the next one is the same. There is no object. She woke up early. And turned up is the same. An old friend turned up at my party. This is intransitive. The price of petrol has gone up again. This is also intransitive. Caught up with the fast runners. Now this one could be said to be transitive because we have the object the fast runners. Caught up with the fast runners. Next one is intransitive. There is no object. And the next one also intransitive. Now we have three, number 8, 9 and 10, which have an object. Number 8, called up the police. Blew up the balloons. Looked up the word. So the first one, called up the police, you could also say called the police up. In other words, this one is separable. And also blew up the balloons, you can also say blew the balloons up. So that one is also separable. Next one, looked up the word, you could also say looked the word up. So again, we have a separable phrasal verb. So this brings us to the end of this Step 1 video on phrasal verbs with up. Move on to the Step 2 video to find a practice exercise with the same phrasal verbs. And remember, click like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this.